The night his wife called me, I was standing at my kitchen sink, humming over a pot of collard greens, thinking about how soft his hands felt when he held mine in church. I remember the way the phone vibrated against the counter, that little rattle against the chipped ceramic. I wiped my hands on a towel, still warm from the stove, and glanced at the screen. Unknown number. At 70 years old, you learn that truly important calls rarely bother with introductions. "Hello," I said, pressing the phone to my ear with a damp hand. There was a pause. I heard breathing. Then a woman's voice, low, steady, the kind of voice that had already done its crying in private. "Is this Mrs. Evelyn Carter?" "Yes, ma'am." "Who's calling?" Another pause. A faint television in the background. Someone laughing in a canned studio audience. Then 4 words that knocked the air out of my chest. "I'm Lionel's wife, ma'am." I stared at the steam rising from my pot like it was spelling out answers. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her, that maybe my ears, like my knees and my back, had decided to falter with age. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "His wife." "Yes," she said, and I heard at that time, the little crack under her composure. "His wife. And I think we need to talk. Because you're not the only one he's been calling his blessing." My hand tightened around the phone until my fingers ached. Somewhere in the house, the old clock in the hallway ticked too loudly, each second stretching out like a question I didn't know how to answer. I wish I could tell you I handled that moment with grace and wisdom like the women you see in movies. But the truth is, my legs went weak, and I had to grip the edge of the counter just to stay upright. 10 years after burying my husband, I had finally let myself believe in love again, and now a stranger was on my line, using the word wife like a knife. If you're watching this, listening to this old woman's story, I want you to stay with me. Tell me in the comments if you've ever trusted someone and felt the rug pulled from beneath your feet. And if you're new here, don't forget to like and subscribe, because the stories we share with each other, sometimes they're the only thing that keep us from thinking we're alone in this mess called love. But before that phone call, before the word wife burned a mark on my heart, there was just me, my quiet house, and 10 long years of learning how to live with an empty side of the bed. My name is Evelyn, and I live in a little brick house on the east side of Richmond, Virginia. The kind of house where the floors creak in familiar places and the walls remember your secrets. My husband, Samuel, bought it for us when we were in our 30s, when interest rates were high and our patience was higher. We raised our son there. We fought there, laughed there, buried a dog in the backyard, and painted the kitchen twice when mustard yellow stopped feeling like joy. Samuel died a week after my 60th birthday. One moment we were at the dining table, his big hands breaking cornbread, his laughter rolling across the room like always. The next week, I was sitting in a cold hospital room, staring at machines that had gone quiet, wondering how the world could keep turning when my husband's chest no longer rose and fell. Grief is a strange kind of roommate. It doesn't come all at once, it moves in slowly. First it sleeps on your couch, then one day you realize it's taken your whole bed. For 10 years, it was just me and that grief, and a son who lived 2 states away with his own family and his own worries. My days settled into a rhythm. Wake up before the sun, make a cup of coffee in the same chipped mug Samuel liked, sit at the kitchen table, and talk to the empty chair across from me as if he might answer. "Morning, Sam," I'd murmur, stirring sugar into my cup. "You wouldn't like this new coffee brand. Too bitter." Sometimes I'd catch myself nodding, as if I heard his reply. I kept busy in the ways widows do. I joined the senior choir at church, even though my voice was more rusty hinge than heavenly host. I volunteer at the food pantry on Wednesdays, stacking cans and offering soft smiles to people whose eyes carried too much weight. On Fridays, I played cards with a group of women from the neighborhood, other widows mostly, and we pretended we were only there for the snacks and the gossip. But the truth was, when the evenings came, the house got too quiet. There's a silence that feels peaceful, like a soft blanket. Then there's the other kind, the one that presses against your ears and makes the tick of the wall clock sound like a hammer. That was the silence I lived with. I told myself I was done with romance. I had my love story, I'd say, straightening the framed wedding picture on the mantel. Some folks don't even get one. I won't be greedy. I believed it. Or at least I wanted to. Then one Sunday he walked into church and my life started shifting in ways I didn't see coming. It was early spring. The kind of Virginia morning where the air still carried winter's chill, but the sunlight had started to soften. I sat at my usual spot, third pew from the back on the left side, clutching my worn Bible like it was a familiar hand. The choir had just finished singing when I heard the back doors open. Footsteps, hushed voices. I didn't pay attention at first. New folks visited our church all the time. But then I smelled something, a faint cologne, warm and spicy, like cedar and orange peel. It drifted past me, pulling my eyes up from the hymn book. He slid into the pew across the aisle, a few seats ahead. Tall, with a full head of silver hair neatly brushed back, and a suit that had seen better days, but still held its dignity. His hands caught my eye first, long fingers, careful movements as he smoothed his tie. Hands that looked like they knew how to fix things. When he turned his head slightly, I saw kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He smiled, just a little, in that polite church way strangers do. I smiled back, then quickly looked back down at my hymnal, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, self-conscious. After service, the pastor asked visitors to stand. The man rose slowly, shoulders straight. "Good morning," he said. His voice was deep but gentle, like a familiar hymn. "My name is Lionel. Lionel Wallace. I lost my wife last year and moved to Richmond to be closer to my niece. She told me this church felt like family. I'm hoping to find a little of that here." A murmur of sympathy swept through the congregation. I felt it catch in my own chest. Lost his wife. The words wrapped around me like a shared blanket of pain. After the benediction, I gathered my purse and Bible, taking my time. I told myself I wasn't waiting, but my feet moved slower than usual toward the exit. I was just stepping into the aisle when I heard a voice behind me. "Ma'am?" "Excuse me, ma'am in the blue hat?" I turned. Lionel stood there, holding his hat in his hands. Up close, I noticed the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the kind that come from both laughter and squinting into the sun. "That's a beautiful hat," he said, smiling. "My wife, she loved hats. Every color under the sun. Seeing yours brought back a good memory." I touched the brim lightly, feeling a blush rise to my cheeks. "Thank you. My husband used to say I wore hats like armor. Made me feel taller than I am." His gaze softened. "Your husband a member here?" "He was," I answered. The past tense still stung, even after a decade. "Samuel passed 10 years ago." "I'm sorry," he said, and for once, it didn't sound like those empty 2 words people say to fill silence. He sounded like a man who had sat beside a hospital bed, like I had. We walked toward the church steps together, joining the stream of people filtering out into the sunlight. The air smelled like wet grass and exhaust as cars pulled out of the parking lot. Somewhere, a child was crying because his mother wouldn't let him have a second donut. "You live nearby?" he asked. "About 6 blocks over," I said, nodding toward the direction of my street. "Little brick house with too many rose bushes out front." He chuckled. "That sounds like a house that's been loved on for a long time." "It has," I replied, then swallowed. Even when it's just me now. He nodded like he understood that kind of loneliness. Well, Miss? Evelyn, I supplied. Evelyn Carter. Well, Ms. Evelyn Carter, he said, rolling my name gently like I knew him. If you don't mind terrible potato salad, maybe you'll sit with me at the church picnic next Sunday. I'm still new around here. Could use someone to tell me which folks to stay away from. His eyes twinkled. And which pies to fight for. I laughed, really laughed for the first time in longer than I could measure. I suppose I could point you toward the good pies, I said. And away from Sister Florence's macaroni. She uses raisins for some reason. He grinned wide then, and something inside my chest, something I thought had died with Samuel, gave the tiniest flutter. That night, as I washed dishes by hand, I caught myself humming. The house didn't feel quite as oppressive. The silence was still there, but it had softened at the edges. I told myself it was nothing. Just a lonely old woman enjoying a little harmless company. I had no idea that the man with the warm eyes and the story about a dead wife was already building a house of lies around both of us. In the days that followed, I found myself thinking about Lionel more than I wanted to admit. His smile lingered in my mind like the warmth of a fading sunbeam. Every time I passed my hallway mirror, I caught myself checking if my hair was smoothed back, if my blouse looked neat, habits I hadn't kept since Samuel died. It embarrassed me a little, how easily an old heart could remember the rhythm of wanting to be seen. By the next Sunday, I arrived at church earlier than usual. I told myself it was to find good parking, but the truth sat quietly in my chest. I hoped he'd be there.
He was.
Standing under the dogwood tree by the front steps, arms crossed lightly, hat tucked under one elbow. When he saw me, his face lit up like someone had called his name across a crowded room. "Good morning, Evelyn," he said, walking toward me with that careful, gentlemanly stride. That blue hat again. I'm starting to think God himself shines the sun different when you wear it. I shook my head, laughing softly. Don't go trying to sweet-talk me in front of the Lord, Lionel. He lifted his hands in surrender. Then I'll just say I'm glad you're here. We sat together during service. Not touching, not too close, but close enough that I felt his presence like a warm coat around my shoulders. When the choir sang, "His eye is on the sparrow," I noticed his hand tremble just slightly. Maybe it was memory, maybe it was grief. I didn't ask. I just placed my hand near his on the pew, not touching, just close enough for the gesture. After service, the church picnic unfolded across the grassy yard like a painting, children racing with balloons, elders clustered under shade tents, the smell of fried chicken drifting through the air. Lionel kept his promise about that terrible potato salad. It was indeed terrible. I ate 2 bites, just to be polite, then whispered, "Now I see why your niece sent you here for fellowship instead of cooking classes." He laughed so hard he had to sit down. We stayed together the whole afternoon.
Talking. Eating.
Sharing little pieces of our lives like puzzle fragments. He told me about his childhood in Savannah, how he loved jazz music, how he missed having someone to cook for now that his sweet Delilah was gone. When he spoke of his wife, there was always a respectful softness in his tone. But no tears, no cracks, just practice sentences. Little stories with no jagged edges.
I didn't notice that then.
Not the way I should have. As we packed up picnic chairs and leftovers, he tapped my arm gently. "Evelyn, would you mind if I walked you home?" I hesitated, not because I didn't want the company, but because I hadn't been walked home by a man in over a decade. It felt strange, tender, dangerous in its own quiet way. But I nodded. The walk was pleasant, unhurried. Richmond's early spring air had a sweetness to it, full of blooming things that hadn't yet learned the world could be unkind. When we reached my little brick house, He paused at the gate, hands tucked into his pockets like a nervous schoolboy. "May I say something honest?" he asked. "Of course." I didn't expect to meet anyone this soon, or to laugh this much. You make the days feel lighter." His words sank into me slowly, gentle but deep. I felt a warmth rise in my chest that I hadn't felt since Samuel whispered love into my ear as we slow danced in our kitchen. "I'm glad I met you, too," I murmured. He looked at me like he wanted to say more, but instead he nodded, tipped his hat, and walked away. That night, I found myself cooking more than I needed: meatloaf, green beans, cornbread, enough for 2 plates. My hands worked automatically, guided by an old instinct, the urge to feed someone you care about. I stood there afterward, staring at the extra plate. I froze. I wasn't supposed to feel this way again. I wasn't supposed to hope this way again. Love had already taken everything from me once. How could I survive if it betrayed me a second time? I sat down at the table, pressing my palms together. "Lord," I whispered, "if this is a blessing, let me receive it with grace. And if it's a lesson, please make it gentle." For the next few weeks, Lionel and I found a quiet rhythm with each other. He brought flowers sometimes, nothing fancy, just grocery store carnations or daisies, but the gesture alone made my heart swell. He'd stop by in the evenings with containers of food he claimed he'd cooked, though something about the store-brand labels on the containers made me wonder. Sometimes we sat on my porch swing, our shoulders brushing, the air humming with crickets and unspoken things. He told me long stories about his travels, about jobs he used to have, about nieces and nephews scattered across the country. The stories were vivid, rich, almost too polished, too ready. But lonely people don't question kindness. Not right away. The first strange moment came on a Tuesday afternoon. I had made sweet tea and was waiting on the porch for Lionel to come by, like he said he would. 6:30 came and went. Then 7. Then 8. At 8:30, he appeared at the bottom of my walkway, breathing a little too hard, shirt wrinkled, tie loosened like he'd been rushing. "Traffic," he said quickly. "Terrible accident on Maple Street." But Maple Street didn't have evening traffic. Not ever. I knew because I walked it every morning. Still, I let it go. The second strange moment came 3 days later. We were sitting on my porch when his phone rang, a cheap flip phone with a cracked front. He snatched it up before I could even glance at the screen and stood, turning away from me. "Yes, no, I told you I'll handle it, don't call me right now." His voice was low, tight, not the Lionel I knew. When he returned, he forced a smile. "Just a bill collector," he said lightly. "They hound you like bloodhounds. But bill collectors don't usually get called baby under someone's breath." And I could have sworn I heard that slip through the line before he snapped the phone shut. Still, I ignored it. You see, the heart learns to make excuses long before it learns to protect itself. The third strange moment wasn't strange. It was undeniable. It was the night he didn't show up at all. We had planned dinner. Simple, baked chicken and roasted potatoes. Nothing fancy. But he didn't come. No call. No message. I waited until the food turned cold. I waited until the porch light made the bugs swarm like lost souls. I waited until midnight. And then I went to bed with a heavy chest and an old, familiar ache, the kind that reminded me of hospital waiting rooms and empty chairs. But nothing prepared me for the next morning. The phone rang at 9:14 a.m. An unknown number. I answered because my heart still wanted a reason to forgive him. But the voice on the other end wasn't Lionel. "Is this Evelyn Carter?" a woman asked. "Yes, who is this?" A pause. A long breath. "My name is Lorraine Wallace," she said. "I'm calling because you've been seeing my husband." My knees nearly buckled. Her next words sliced the thin hope I'd been holding onto. He told you he was a widower, but he's not. And you're not the only woman he's been lying to. I pressed my hand to my mouth. The room tilted. Her voice softened. Please, I think we need to talk. Outside, a bird sang brightly, painfully out of place. Inside me, something cracked wide open. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The phone felt heavy against my ear, as if the truth inside it was made of stone. My eyes fixed on the window, on the sunlight hitting the rose bushes Samuel planted decades ago.
Bright, soft, ordinary.
How could the world look untouched when mine had just split open? Mrs. Carter, the woman's voice said again, gentler this time. Are you still there? I'm here, I whispered, though my voice sounded like someone else's. I don't understand. I didn't either, she replied quietly. Not at first. Behind her voice I heard something, not anger, not even grief. Exhaustion. A kind of weary dignity that told me this woman had swallowed too many hard truths already. Could we meet? She asked. Somewhere neutral. I'm not calling to attack you. I'm calling because I think we've both been lied to. My heart pressed against my ribs. Where? The Maple Ridge Cafe, she said. Around 2? There's something you need to see. I nodded, forgetting she couldn't see me. I'll be there. We hung up, and I stood in the middle of my quiet kitchen with my hand trembling against my thigh. My home, usually so familiar, suddenly felt like a place I didn't recognize. The cabinets were too still. The clock was too loud. Even the air felt wrong. I sat at the table, clasping my hands together as memories flooded me like a cruel slideshow. Lionel laughing under the dogwood tree. Lionel brushing crumbs from his jacket after eating my cornbread. Lionel telling me his sweet Delilah was gone.
Gone. Dead.
Buried. Only she wasn't. Lord, I whispered inside. What did I let into my heart? At 1:15, I dressed slowly, chose a soft mauve blouse, brushed my thinning hair back with care. Not because I wanted to look nice, but because dignity is a woman's armor when everything else is falling apart. By the time I reached the Maple Ridge Cafe, my palms were cold. The bell chimed when I opened the door, and I scanned the room until I saw her. She sat alone in a corner booth. Mid-60s, maybe a little younger than me. Her hair was neat, pulled into a low bun streaked with silver. She wore no ring. Her hands were folded around a mug of coffee, steam curling between her fingers. Her posture told me everything, straight back, chin lifted, but eyes tired. She looked up. Our eyes met. Recognition passed between us, the kind only women who have been deceived share. Evelyn, she asked. I nodded and slid into the booth across from her. She offered a small smile, not warm but respectful. Thank you for coming. I think I needed to, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You said you had something to tell me. She inhaled deeply, as if gathering strength. Lionel is my husband, she said. We've been married 39 years. Off and on. Mostly off these days. Her lips tightened, but not divorced. Not widowed. And certainly not dead. A heat rose behind my eyes. I blinked it back. He told me you passed last year. She gave a bitter, humorless laugh. I heard. You're not the first woman he's lied to with that story. My fingers curled around my napkin. Shame crept up my neck like ivy. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Her voice softened. Her gaze held no accusation, only understanding. He's good at charming lonely women. Always has been. Makes himself look harmless. Broken. In need of comfort. Her mouth twisted. But the truth is, Lionel doesn't commit. He collects. My stomach turned. He told me he moved to Richmond to be near his niece, I said shakily. He doesn't have a niece here, she replied. He comes here when he wants to disappear, when he wants to pretend to be a better man for a while. I felt the blood drain from my face. Her hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching mine. He's seeing 2 other women, she said softly. At least 2 that I know of. One in Chesterfield, one on the north side. Both think he's a widower. She reached into her bag and slid her phone toward me. And I think you should see this. I looked down at the screen. A picture. Lionel, same silver hair, same gentle smile, holding a woman around the waist outside a grocery store. A woman maybe in her early 60s, wearing bright red lipstick. His hand rested on her hip, familiar, casual, the same hand that held mine on my porch swing. Below it, another photo. Lionel at a bowling alley, laughing beside a petite woman with glasses. His arm draped around her shoulders like a man who belonged there. My chest tightened. Oh, God. And this, she said, swiping to the last image. The third photo was of Lionel sitting on the edge of a bed in a dimly lit room, his shirt half unbuttoned, speaking animatedly into his phone. 3 different dates were stamped under the images, all recent. All during the same weeks he'd been sitting on my porch, telling me how much lighter his days felt with me in them. I pressed my hand to my mouth, fighting the urge to cry in that little cafe. I'm sorry, Mrs. Wallace murmured. I know this is a lot, but you deserve to know. How long have you known about all this? I whispered. Years. She stared into her coffee as if it held memories she wished she could forget. I used to chase him down, argue, beg, threaten to leave. But eventually I realized something important. She lifted her eyes to mine. You can't save a man who's in love with the version of himself he pretends to be. Her words hit something deep inside me, a truth I hadn't had language for. We sat in silence for a moment. The clatter of dishes in the kitchen felt distant, almost muffled. My pulse thudded in my ears. Why call me? I finally asked. Because you're not like the others, she said simply. You're older.
Kind.
Steady. You remind me of myself before he wore me down. Her gaze softened even more. And because I think you're strong enough to hear the truth. I swallowed hard. What do we do now? She tilted her head. What do you want to do? The question landed with a surprising weight. Because for the first time since Lionel walked into my church, I realized I had choices. Agency.
Voice.
I want him to see what he's done, I said quietly. I want him to know I'm not the fool he thinks I am. A slow, understanding smile touched her lips. Then we can help each other. I frowned slightly.
We.
Yes.
She leaned in.
I want to introduce you to someone. Before I could ask who, the bell above the cafe door chimed. I glanced back. A woman in a red coat, the same woman from the grocery store photo, stood frozen in the doorway, staring straight at us. Her eyes dropped to the table, to the phone displaying Lionel's deceit. And then she walked toward our booth, her jaw tight, her step steady. Lorraine Wallace, his actual wife, gave a small nod. That's the other woman, she murmured. Number 2. My breath caught. Suddenly, it wasn't just me and Lionel's wife anymore. It was becoming something bigger. Something Lionel never expected. The woman in the red coat approached our booth with the steady grace of someone who's already rehearsed heartbreak in private. Her lipstick matched the fabric of her coat, bold, defiant, the color of someone refusing to be small. But her eyes, Lord, her eyes were tired. Lorraine, his real wife, slid out of the booth just enough to make room. Janice, she said quietly, as if speaking to an old ache instead of a person. Thank you for coming. Janice eased into the seat beside me. smoothing her coat under her legs. She offered me a polite, apologetic smile. "You must be Evelyn," she said. "I'm sorry we're meeting like this." "I'm sorry you have to meet me at all," I murmured. Janice shook her head gently.
No.
"This isn't on either of us." Her hands were trembling. I noticed because she clasped them together, pressing her fingers tight as if trying to hide the shakiness. Lorraine reached across and touched her wrist briefly, a silent offering of steadiness. The three of us looked like women who should have been meeting for Bible study or garden club. Instead, we were gathering like survivors emerging from the same collapsed house. Lorraine took a breath. "Janice, I was just telling Evelyn what Lionel's been doing." "And I have something to add," Janice said. She pulled out her phone and placed it gently on the table like an offering. I didn't want to believe it when Lorraine first called me. Not until I checked. With a swipe, she opened her messaging app. What I saw made my stomach twist. Rows of messages from Lionel, long ones, short ones, sweet ones, all sent in the same weeks he'd been sitting on my porch, reading scripture with me and complimenting my roses. "Good morning, beautiful. My day is better just hearing your voice. I cooked dinner thinking about you. I miss you. I wish I hadn't lost Delilah so soon." That last one nearly made me choke. "Delilah," I whispered. "His wife's name is Lorraine." Janice nodded. "He told me the same story he told you. Wife gone. Heartbroken. Looking for a fresh start." Lorraine's eyes hardened, just slightly. "I told you he has the script memorized." Janice blew out a shaky breath. "Yesterday, he told me he needed space to deal with grief. That's why I knew something was off." I looked between them, my chest tight. "So, what are we supposed to do? Sit around comparing stories while he strings even more women along?" Lorraine leaned back, her expression calm in a way that told me she'd already moved past rage.
No.
I called this meeting because it was time we stopped reacting to Lionel's choices and started making our own. Janice clenched her jaw. "I want him to know I'm done. For good. And I want him to stop lying to women the way he lied to us all," I added quietly. The words surprised me with their strength. Not for revenge. For closure. For dignity. Lorraine nodded slowly, approvingly. "Then we do this together." Before I could ask what she meant, she pulled a small, neatly folded flyer from her purse and laid it on the table. A church flyer. Our church. "Next Sunday," she said softly, tapping the date with one finger. "There's a community luncheon after service. Lionel always goes when he's in town, likes being seen, likes playing the grieving widower." My breath caught. "And you want us all there," I said. Lorraine nodded. "Where he can't hide. Where the truth can come out in the light, not in secret phone calls or quiet tears." Janice swallowed hard. "You want to confront him in front of the whole church?" "Not confront," Lorraine corrected gently. "Reveal. Let his actions speak for themselves. Let him realize that the women he hurt found each other instead of fighting each other." I looked down at my hands. They were steady now, strangely steady. "And after that?" I whispered. "After that," Lorraine said, "he can choose whatever story he wants to tell. But we'll walk away knowing we told our own." Something inside me, something fragile and bruised, straightened its spine. We spent the next hour sharing details, comparing timelines, piecing together the lies he'd woven around each of us. The more we talked, the more I saw it clearly. Lionel wasn't a monster. Monsters have intention, strategy. He was something worse, a man who used affection like camouflage. A man who didn't know how to love without lying. For a moment, Janice wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I feel so stupid," she whispered. Like there were signs and I ignored them. Lorraine placed a hand over hers. "You're not stupid. Lionel chooses kind women. Lonely women. Women who trust too easily because they were raised to love deeply. That's not a flaw. I inhaled slowly. It's what makes us human. We fell into a soft silence after that, 3 women bound not by bitterness, but by clarity. When we finally stood to leave, Lorraine looked at us both. "Next Sunday," she said firmly. "We go together." Janice nodded. Together. I swallowed the thickness in my throat. Together, I echoed. We stepped outside into the cool afternoon air. The sky was a pale blue, streaked with lazy clouds. People passed by, living their ordinary lives, unaware of the quiet coalition forming on the corner of Maple Ridge. As we parted ways, Janice hugged me gently, the kind of hug women give when they've seen too much of each other's hurt. Lorraine gave me a small nod of strength before climbing into her car. When I got home, the house felt different. The silence was no longer threatening, because I wasn't alone in my confusion anymore. I had witnesses. I had allies. I had truth. And truth, I realized, is a kind of power all its own. That evening, as I sat on my porch with a blanket across my lap, the dusk breeze brushed against my cheek. I thought of Samuel, quiet, steady Samuel, and wondered what he would say if he were alive. Maybe he'd tell me that love shouldn't make you shrink, that companionship shouldn't make you question your worth, that a man who needs lies to keep you doesn't deserve to keep you at all. As the streetlights flickered on, my phone buzzed. Lionel. His name lit up the screen like a shadow I was finally ready to step out from. I stared at it, not answering. Not this time. He could wait. Next Sunday was coming. And so was the truth. I let Lionel's call ring until it faded into silence. For the first time since meeting him, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel anxious. I didn't feel that fluttery softness in my chest that had kept me awake at night, wondering what he saw in me. Instead, I felt something steady forming inside me, a quiet kind of strength, the kind that comes not from anger, but from clarity. The next few days passed slowly, like the world was giving me time to settle into myself again. I cleaned the house, wiped down windows I hadn't touched in months, tossed out old receipts Lionel had left on the counter. I moved like a woman reclaiming her space, inch by inch. On Wednesday, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Lionel standing on my front porch, holding a plastic bag of grocery store roses. Pink ones. The delicate kind that bruise at the slightest touch. "Evelyn," he said brightly, as though nothing in the world was amiss. I was worried. "Haven't heard from you in a few days." He stepped forward to kiss my cheek, but I took a small step back. Subtle. Controlled. His smile faltered. "Everything okay?" I forced a gentle smile. One just warm enough to be believable, but firm enough to keep him from stepping past the threshold of my front door. "I've been thinking," I said softly.
About what? About life.
About the kind of future I want. His eyebrows lifted. His fingers fidgeted with the plastic around the roses. A nervous tell I hadn't seen before. "Well," he chuckled, adjusting his tie, "hopefully that future still includes me." There it was, the performance.
The charm.
The line said in just the right tone to coax a woman into reassurance. But I didn't bite. I touched the edge of the door, holding it lightly. "Lionel, I'm going to church on Sunday. I'd like you to be there." He blinked. "Church? Of course. I never miss a service when I'm in town." "I know," I said softly. "That's why I want you there." There must have been something in my tone, something steady, something he wasn't used to from me, because his smile tightened just a little. His eyes narrowed the slightest bit, searching my expression like he was trying to find the script. "Well," he said slowly, "I'll be there. And maybe after service, we can talk properly. You and me." A small nod. "Yes, Lionel. We will." I took the roses from his hand, and closed the door gently before he could say another word. As soon as the latch clicked, I dropped the flowers into the trash. The petals were already bruising. Sunday could not come fast enough. When the morning finally arrived, my nerves thrummed like live wires under my skin. I chose a deep purple dress, modest but strong. Not the soft, pastel colors I used to wear around Lionel. This color made me stand tall. At the mirror, I pinned my silver hair back with deliberate care. I felt my age. I felt my strength. I felt my dignity. When I arrived at church, the sanctuary buzzed with murmurs of conversation, children wobbling between pews, old friends hugging in the aisles. I walked toward the third pew, my usual spot, and paused. Lorraine was already there. She wore a navy blue skirt and pearl earrings. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, her face calm but resolute. She looked at me and nodded once. I slid in beside her. A moment later, Janice entered, her red coat draped elegantly over her arm. She sat on Lorraine's other side.
We didn't need to speak.
Our presence beside one another was enough, a quiet fortress built of shared truth. Then Lionel walked in. He scanned the room with that familiar, gentle smile, ready to charm, ready to perform. But when his eyes landed on our row, on the three of us sitting shoulder to shoulder, like a unified wall, his smile flickered, then collapsed completely. He stopped walking. Something in his posture stiffened. His hand tightened around the brim of his hat. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing sharply. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked unsure. He approached slowly, hesitant, wary, like a man walking toward the consequences of his own choices. "Evelyn," he said softly when he reached our pew. "Ladies." His voice trembled just barely. "Good morning, Lionel," Lorraine said, her tone polite but edged with steel. He looked between us, eyes darting nervously. What's going on?" "Take a seat," Lorraine murmured calmly. "Service is starting." He hesitated. Then, with no other choice, he slid into the pew in front of us. He didn't look back. Not once. Through the hymns, he shifted. Through the sermon, he fidgeted. Through the prayers, he wiped sweat from his temple. He didn't speak to anyone. Didn't reach for his Bible. Didn't even pretend to sing. He knew something was coming. When service ended, the pastor announced the luncheon in the fellowship hall. People began to file out, heading toward the smell of fried chicken and warm rolls. We stood together. 3 women.
Calm. Steady.
Lionel tried to slip out through a side aisle, but Lorraine's voice stopped him. "Lionel," she called gently. "We need a word." He turned, jaw tight, face pale. "Lorraine, don't do this here." "No," she said calmly. "We're doing it exactly here." People nearby paused, turned,
Watched.
Janice stepped forward first, her voice soft but unwavering. "You lied to me." Then I stepped beside her. "And to me." Lorraine stepped to the front. "And to me for 39 years. A hush fell over the room. The church's kindest faces, people who'd brought casseroles to widows, people who'd prayed for neighbors' lost children, watched him with eyes full of stunned silence. Lionel opened his mouth.
Closed it.
Opened it again. But there was no script for this moment. No charm polished enough to cover this truth. "Ladies," he stammered, "please, let's not make a scene." "We're not making a scene," Lorraine said softly. "We're telling the truth." Janice held out her phone. Photos. Text messages. I looked him in the eye. "You don't get to use grief to trick good women, Lionel. Not anymore." People around us murmured. A few gasped. Someone whispered, "Lord, have mercy." Lionel's face crumbled in on itself, shame collapsing whatever performance he still had left. His shoulders fell, and for the first time, he looked small. Not like a predator. Not like a villain. Just a broken man who broke others. He backed away, shaking his head slowly, tears forming in his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered hoarsely, before turning and walking out the door. Not toward any of us. Not toward anyone. Just away.
Silent. Alone.
The three of us stood together, breathing slowly, holding our ground. Not vindictive. Not triumphant. Just free. And God, freedom tastes different when you've earned it with truth. For several long seconds after Lionel slipped out the door, the church fellowship hall stayed hushed. People stood with plates of food halfway lifted, conversations halted mid-sentence, their eyes shifting between the three of us, as though we'd just cracked a window open in a room nobody realized had been suffocating them. Lorraine finally exhaled, a slow release she must have been holding for years. Janice brushed a trembling strand of hair behind her ear. I stood perfectly still, my heart steady in a way it hadn't been since Samuel died. Ladies, Lorraine said gently, let's eat. It was the most ordinary sentence she could have spoken, and somehow it grounded us all. We walked toward the food tables together. Heads turned. Whispers fluttered like nervous birds. But the three of us kept our backs straight and our pace even. At the fried chicken tray, Sister Florence, a woman who could gossip without moving her lips, leaned in slightly. You all right, Miss Evelyn? She murmured. I'm fine, I said with a smile that didn't crack. Better than fine, actually. Lorraine nodded in agreement. Janice pressed her lips together like she was fighting a tired smile. And suddenly, whomever we saw in that fellowship hall, their faces softened, not with pity, but with respect. Women know when another woman has reclaimed her dignity. It shines through like stained glass in sunlight. We found a table near the back, away from the most curious eyes. The church hall smelled of warm rolls, sweet corn casserole, and the faint tang of lemon cleaner someone had used too aggressively. Janice poked at her greens with the side of her fork. Do you think he'll come back in? No, Lorraine answered simply, tearing a roll in half. Lionel never stays in places where he can't control the story. I sipped my sweet tea, letting the coolness settle me. Then today was the first time he ever faced one. Lorraine gave a soft, proud nod. And the last. We ate quietly for a moment, each of us letting the truth settle, letting the weight of the morning ease off our shoulders. Eventually, Lorraine set down her fork and looked between us. I want to say this clearly, she said. What happened today wasn't revenge. It was clarity. And clarity is a gift women seldom grant themselves. Janice blinked back tears. I kept thinking, maybe I should have been smarter. Or more cautious. Or less lonely. No, I said, laying a hand over hers. A good heart isn't a weakness. Lorraine nodded. And loneliness isn't a flaw. Janice's shoulders slumped in relief, and she finally let herself breathe. For the next hour, we talked not about Lionel, but about life. About our children, our hobbies, the recipes we'd perfected, and the ones we'd ruined. About the little joys we'd forgotten to make space for. It felt like the beginning of something, not friendship, not exactly, but sisterhood born from truth. When the luncheon wound down, volunteers began stacking chairs and wiping tables. People stopped by our table to squeeze our hands or offer soft nods. Some whispered, "Proud of you." Others said, "You did the right thing." A few simply tapped the table and moved on, their eyes warm. And then, as the crowd thinned, someone unexpected approached. Pastor Green, a tall man with tired eyes, but a heart big enough to carry the whole congregation on his back. He pulled up a chair, turned it around, and sat with his arms resting on the back. "I won't pry," he said gently, But I want you to know something. Truth doesn't break community. It strengthens it. And the three of you stood in truth today. Lorraine nodded gratefully. Janice wiped her cheeks. I felt something steady and peaceful settle into my bones. Pastor, I said softly, I haven't felt this clear in a long time. He smiled. Sometimes the Lord sends storms not to drown us, but to wash away what doesn't belong. When he left, we finally gathered our things and stepped outside into the warm afternoon. The sun felt different, brighter somehow, or maybe I was finally lifting my face high enough to meet it. We parted ways in the parking lot with gentle hugs and promises to check in on each other. Lorraine squeezed my hand before getting into her car. You're stronger than you think, Evelyn, she said. Don't let this harden you. Let it sharpen you. I will, I said quietly. Thank you. Janice hugged me tightly. I'm glad I wasn't alone in this, she whispered. You never were, I replied. Once home, I unlocked my front door and stepped inside. The air smelled familiar again, lavender from the candle I lit last night, the lingering scent of pot roast I'd cooked earlier in the week. My home felt like mine.
Truly mine.
Not a stage for a man's lies. Not a waiting room for disappointment. Just mine. On the coffee table lay the grocery store roses, now wilting in the trash bin. Their petals were curling inward, bruised and tired. And strangely, looking at them gave me a sense of peace. I had loved Samuel with everything in me, and for a time, I had let Lionel make me believe I could love again. But loving again didn't require being foolish or blind. It required being whole. I wasn't broken, just reshaped. I sat on the couch, pulling my shawl around my shoulders and closed my eyes. The house felt warm, steady, filled with a quiet that wasn't empty anymore, but peaceful. Then suddenly, a knock at the door. A soft, hesitant one. My eyes opened. 3 knocks, careful, polite. I stood slowly, walked to the door, and opened it. Not Lionel, not Janice, not Lorraine. A man I'd never seen before, tall, kind eyes, maybe mid-70s, holding a casserole dish covered in foil. He wore a simple flannel shirt and jeans, his posture humble. Ma'am, he said, tipping his head. My name is Henry from down the street. I heard there was a bit of trouble at church today. Thought you might appreciate a warm meal. His smile was gentle, respectful, not hungry, not searching, not false. A different kind of man entirely. For a moment, I just looked at him, feeling something unfamiliar flicker in my chest. Not romance, not yet. Just possibility. A soft, honest possibility. Well, I said, stepping aside, that's very kind. Come on in. As he entered, the evening sun stretched across my living room, golden and wide, like a door opening, like a life shifting, not because of a man, but because I was ready to step forward, with dignity, with clarity, and with a heart that still knew how to hope. Would you like me to continue to part 7? You said. Continue, ChatGPT said. Part 7. Continuing the story 1,000 words. Picking up exactly where the story left off. No headings. No summaries. Pure cinematic anti-May style narrative. Henry stepped into my living room with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the value of gentleness. He wasn't trying to impress me. He wasn't trying to charm me. He was simply being kind. Kindness, real, simple kindness, is a language you don't forget, even after years of speaking only grief. He placed the casserole dish on my kitchen counter and peeled back a corner of the foil. A warm, savory smell drifted up. Chicken and rice, he said shyly, scratching his cheek. My late wife, Marianne, used to make it on rough days. I don't cook it often, but today felt like one of those days. Thought you might appreciate a bite. I felt the sting of tears behind my eyes, not from sadness, but from the unexpected tenderness of it all. I clasped my hands together to steady myself. That's very thoughtful, I whispered. Thank you. He nodded toward the dining table. Mind if I sit for a bit? Only if you're comfortable. I considered it for a moment, not out of fear, but out of respect for my own heart. Then I nodded and gestured to the chair across from mine. We sat. Quietly. Easily. For a while, the only sound in the room was the soft hum of my refrigerator and the gentle clink of Henry adjusting his fork. I took a bite. It wasn't fancy, but it tasted like comfort. Warm, familiar, steady. Henry watched me the way respectful men do. Not staring, not searching for approval, just making sure I wasn't overwhelmed. He started, clearing his throat. Heard a thing or two after service. My hand froze around my fork. Oh, and what exactly did you hear? He raised both palms gently. Nothing detailed. Just folks whispering about a man who wasn't treating good women right. And that you were one of them. I felt my jaw tighten, but not with embarrassment. With dignity. Does that bother you? I asked softly. Henry shook his head. Ma'am, people get lied to every day. That's not a reflection on them. It's a reflection on the liar. My chest loosened, like someone had unknotted a rope inside it. That's very kind of you to say. He shrugged modestly. Just truth. We talked a little about the neighborhood, about gardening, about the church choir he'd recently joined even though he admitted he couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. He made me laugh, a small, surprised laugh that slipped out before I could stop it. And the strange thing was, it didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like breathing after holding my breath for too long. When Henry finally stood to leave, he paused by the doorway, hat in hand. His eyes were warm but respectful. You're stronger than most folks give you credit for, he said softly. If you ever need help with anything, groceries, yard work, a ride somewhere, just knock on my fence. I'm 2 houses down. I nodded, gratitude swelling in my chest. I'll keep that in mind. He tipped his head, gave a small smile, and walked down the steps. I watched him go, the evening sun casting a long, soft shadow behind him. When I closed the door, my house felt different again. Not full, but ready. Ready for peace. Ready for healing. Ready for me. The next morning, I woke with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. I made coffee, swept my kitchen floor, watered my roses, hummed as I opened my blinds. The world looked clearer, like truth had rinsed the fog away. Around noon, I went for a walk to clear my mind. The spring air smelled faintly of cut grass and magnolia blossoms. Children played hopscotch on cracked sidewalks. A mailman trundled along with a little wave. Halfway down the street, I saw Lorraine sitting on her porch with a cup of hot tea. She lifted her hand, inviting me over. I walked up her steps slowly. Her porch had hanging ferns and a rocking chair that looked well-loved. She patted the seat beside her. Come on, let me see how you're doing. I sat, letting the gentle porch breeze ease over my skin. You holding up all right? She asked, sipping her tea. I think I'm doing better than all right, I said. I think I'm steady. She nodded approvingly. Good. You deserve steady. We sat in companionable silence for a while. Then she said something unexpected. Evelyn, do you know what saved me through all this? Not staying angry at Lionel. Anger's too heavy to carry at our age. I forgave him. Not for him, but for my own peace. I swallowed. I'm not sure I'm ready for forgiveness. You don't have to be, she said gently. Forgiveness doesn't start in the heart. It starts in the decision not to keep reopening the wound. I let her words settle. She was right. I didn't need to hate him. I didn't need to fix him. I didn't need to punish him. I just needed to let him go like a stone too heavy to carry. After a while, Janice walked up the driveway, carrying 2 small potted begonias. I figured we could all use something new to grow, she said with a shy smile. And just like that, the 3 of us sat together on Lorraine's porch, talking like old friends. Not about Lionel, but about our gardens, our families, our favorite hymns. Women healing in the quiet ways women do, side by side, with soft laughter and shared lessons. When I returned home that afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in years. That evening, as sunset painted the sky in gold and pink, I lit a candle in my living room and whispered a small prayer of gratitude, not for Lionel, but for the women who had walked into my life at exactly the right time. For the truth that didn't destroy me.
For the freedom that followed.
And maybe, just maybe, for the quiet possibility of something new someday, whether that be friendship or community, or a man who knew how to offer love without deception. I wasn't chasing anything now. I wasn't afraid of anything now. I was becoming myself again. The next morning, I woke before the sun, not out of worry, not out of habit, but because something inside me felt open.
Soft.
Settled. For the first time in a long while, I didn't lie there staring at the ceiling waiting for my grief to find me. Instead, I sat up slowly, stretched my legs, and whispered a quiet thank you to a God who had seen me through storms I didn't ask for and truths I didn't expect. The house glowed faintly in the early dawn. I walked to the kitchen and brewed coffee in my chipped white mug, the one Samuel bought me on our 15th anniversary, painted with hydrangeas. I held it against my chest and breathed deeply, watching the steam curl upward like a gentle spirit rising. It didn't smell like loneliness anymore. It smelled like peace. Later that day, I went outside to tend to the rose bushes in my front yard. The petals were full, blushing pink and velvet soft. I snipped away dried stems, letting the old fall to the ground so the new could grow. There was something symbolic about that, pruning, trimming away what no longer served life. It felt almost holy. As I worked, I heard footsteps approaching. "Morning, Miss Evelyn." I looked up to see Henry walking down the sidewalk, wearing a plaid shirt and holding a small bag of gardening soil under one arm. His smile was relaxed, natural. "Morning, Henry," I said, brushing dirt from my hands. "You're up early." "Ah, well," he chuckled. I woke up thinking my tomatoes looked a little thirsty. Turns out they did. He lifted the bag of soil. "And then I thought maybe your roses might like a little boost too." I blinked, warmth spreading through my chest. "That's very kind." He shrugged modestly. "Not kindness, just neighborly sense. Can't have the prettiest roses on the block going without a little extra care." We laughed together, and the sound drifted into the morning air, light and genuine. Henry knelt beside me, opening the bag. He worked slow and steady, like a man who respected the living things he touched. I watched the way his hands moved, patient, never rushed, the complete opposite of Lionel's flustered, evasive energy. Henry didn't fill a silence just to feel comfortable. He let the quiet rest between us as naturally as breath. After a moment, he glanced over. "You know, I heard something in church last night." I tensed slightly. "Oh," he smiled softly. "Someone said they were impressed with how you handled everything." I sniffed, embarrassed. I didn't do anything heroic. I just told the truth. "Sometimes that's the bravest thing," he said. We worked quietly for a while, tamping soil, trimming leaves. When we finished, we both stood back and admired the roses standing proudly in the sunlight. "Beautiful," he said. "They are," I whispered. Then he looked at me, not at the roses, but at me. They're not the only thing looking a bit brighter. My heart fluttered, softly, gently, unexpectedly. Not the panicked, hopeful flutter Lionel had coaxed from me. This was different, wiser,
Calmer.
a flutter that didn't ask anything of me except openness. Henry, I said, not sure how to finish the sentence. He lifted his hands in surrender. No pressure. No expectation. Just a neighbor offering a few flowers and a little conversation. I smiled. I can handle that. He nodded, stepped back toward the sidewalk, and gave a little wave. If you ever need help planting something new, let me know. I watched him go, then looked down at my roses, blooming stronger than I'd seen them in years. The rest of the week flowed with a rhythm that felt newly mine. I baked muffins for the first time in months. I called my son just to hear his voice. I sat on my porch in the evenings and listened to the hum of the neighborhood, dogs barking, children giggling, somebody practicing a horn too loudly down the street. And through it all, I didn't think of Lionel with anger, only with distance. One evening, as the sky turned lavender and gold, I sat on my porch swing and whispered to the empty seat beside me. Samuel, if you can hear me, I hope you know I didn't stop loving you. Not even for a second. I just needed to remember I was still meant to live. A breeze rustled the roses in reply, soft as a blessing. A few days later, Lorraine called. Checking in, she said warmly. How's your heart today? Lighter, I said honestly. Good. Mine too. We talked about ordinary things, church choir rehearsals, a recipe she wanted to try, a stray cat her neighbor kept feeding. It felt easy, familiar, like two women standing on the other side of a storm looking at the now clear sky. Before hanging up, she said, Evelyn, I'm proud of you. I pressed my hand to my chest.
Thank you, Lorraine.
I'm proud of you too. After the call ended, I sat quietly on my couch, letting her words settle. I had been broken before, when Samuel died, and I'd feared that heartbreak had made me fragile. But standing in truth, facing humiliation, finding strength with two other women, it didn't break me further. It rebuilt me. Days passed. My home felt warmer. My steps felt lighter. My laughter came easier. One morning, I looked in the bathroom mirror, really looked, and I saw a woman not diminished by betrayal, but expanded by clarity. I saw a woman who'd learned she could be alone without being lonely. A woman who had rediscovered her own company. A woman who no longer needed someone else's affection to feel whole. That kind of healing, it's a quiet victory. It doesn't shout. It hums. And as the weeks passed, that hum grew into something steady and strong. One Sunday after church, as we walked out into the sunlit parking lot, Henry approached me with 2 cups of lemonade. For the walk home, he said, offering one to me. I laughed softly. Walk home? That's only 6 blocks. Well, he said, grinning, 6 blocks goes faster with company. And for the first time since Samuel died, I let a man walk beside me, not ahead, not behind, not guiding me, not leaning on me. Beside me, talking softly about tomatoes and porch repairs and the little joys of aging with grace. I didn't feel swept away. I felt grounded. I didn't feel bewitched. I felt safe. That's how healing happens at 70. Not with fireworks. With gentle steps. Honest company. A heart that knows its own worth. When we reached my house, he tipped his head. If you ever want to walk again, just say the word. I nodded. I will. He smiled and walked away, no pressure, no expectation, just respect. And in that moment, I realized something. Love wasn't gone from my life. It had simply changed shape. And the new shape was softer.
Kinder.
Wiser. I stepped inside my home, closed the door behind me, and exhaled with a peace so full it almost brought me to tears. I was finally myself again. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, thank you. It means more than you know to have your company. When I first heard that woman's voice on the phone, the real wife, the one he lied about burying, I thought my heart had run out of chances. At 70 years old, you don't expect new beginnings. You don't expect your story to stretch and bend and surprise you anymore. But life has a way of reminding us we're still capable of growing, still capable of choosing ourselves, still capable of healing. And here's the truth I didn't know before all this. You don't need a man to make you whole. But if you do welcome someone into your life, let it be someone honest, someone gentle, someone who sees your worth without you having to shrink, soften, or disappear. Lionel didn't break me. He showed me where I'd forgotten my own strength. Lorraine reminded me that sisterhood can heal things romance never could. Janice reminded me that loneliness doesn't make us foolish. And Henry, well, he reminded me that kindness is still alive in the world.
And as for me?
I'm still learning, still breathing, still blooming. At 70 years old, with silver hair and soft hands, and a heart that refuses to stop believing in better days. Now let me ask you, from one human being to another, have you ever had to walk away from someone who made you question your worth? If you feel comfortable, share a little in the comments. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. And if this touched you, even a little, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow along for more stories. We're building something tender and strong here, one truth at a time. Thank you for listening. Take care of your heart.